Okay, so this is going to be my video on Freakonomics and explain, let's see, where is it? We're going to be explaining what's the difference between causation and correlation. Now, causation, you can see them more as a cause and effect. Correlation is more of two things that relate to each other and have an influence on each other. Now, when you start talking about Freakonomics, we have two chapters to kind of focus on, which would be why do drug dealers still live with their moms, and does a child's name have to do with their success, or it was Rashonda by another name, smells sweet. Now, with the drug dealers, there is, I believe, a causation effect here. And the causation comes from how America is structured. The corporations that we have, major corporations, have very similar trickle-down effect with their economic plans. For example, your CEOs and your boards all get paid the most out of the profits and the gross made from the company. Then you go down. Then you go down to the CFOs and CEOs. Into branches, branch managers, you get general managers, you go down to store managers, and then you've got the people at the very bottom, who are basically the janitors and the cashiers and the people in the kitchen. And as you go down, the money gets smaller and smaller, if that makes sense. You start getting into minimum wage for people working $7.50 or so an hour, taking orders. And they're going to get the most grueling job as to deal with the public every day, working long hours, low benefits, but there's the most of them. So you kind of divide it into pieces, and that piece of the pie gets smaller every time you add a new person. With your managers, it's not as bad. There's less managers, but the same piece of the pie, they each get a bigger piece. You keep going up, and everyone up top gets the most money. And now that kind of deals with the drug dealers, because the gang that sit there went to see with the gang leaders, JT. They showed that as you went down to like the foot soldiers, they were getting paid about $7 an hour, while JT was making off the books about $100,000 a year, and he was making a significant amount of money. The board was making almost $500,000 a year, and the issue is that the board's kind of off to the side. They take the bounce back kind of like deals being made. Anytime there's a deal made by one of the gangs, they take a percentage of about 20%. Then JT takes whatever from his gang, and the foot soldiers who have their life on the line, they're the ones who have to deal with the constant risk of being arrested by police on the street, being shot by other gangs, very low pay, high hazard conditions, and they're usually the foot soldiers of wars between the gangs. They aren't being paid as much, and it's very much a causation of how this community looks at money and power. They want to achieve money and power. So what they do is they look at the big corporations, and this causes them to model themselves after that. So you get that same structure on a very less stable scale. With these corporations, they have lawyers, they have, they're dotting their I's and crossing their T's, and they kind of know where the line is to be drawn. While these gangs don't. They're fighting with each other. They're fighting and scrapping for every last dollar. And it's a very rough around the edges version of a corporation. Now when you move into the one about the child's name, what does a child's name have to do with their success? You get into how these same communities that are affected by low income, plagued by poverty, does their naming have to do with their success, such as a kid named Jake Williams, for example, in the book. Jake Williams is supposed to do better things than Deshaun Williams just because of his name. And is that really so? As the book goes on, it explains that not necessarily, because if Jake Williams and Deshaun Williams live right next to each other, they're going to have the same success rate. But the parents who named their kid Deshaun are more likely to be coming from a low-income family, rather than Jake, who's more likely to be coming from a high-income family or a moderate-income family. And that kind of sets up their success. So it's not the naming per se causing them to earn lower, learn less, and be economically disadvantaged, but it's actually a correlation between, which is an effect between the two. The lower the income of the family, the more likely it is that they're going to come from a more cultural name that's not as common, very unique, different spellings, different. You have like the top 20 names for white families versus black families, and you tend to find that the more common names differ highly from each other. So instead of saying, well, Deshaun's going to get paid less, he's not going to have the same job opportunities, it's because of his name, but it correlates to his background. Most likely the person who gave him that name has also received a similar name. Very unique, very cultural. They thought it came from during the time of the Black Power movement, of where families were trying to stick to their heritage, and instead of going with the trend of, I'm going to name my son Connor, I'm going to name my daughter Molly, or Madeline, or Sarah, they went with more, we're going to stick to our own culture, make sure it keeps on and thriving. So instead of there being a causation of name equals economic destruction, it's actually economic destruction and name kind of altering each other, with economic destruction going worse economic standing. You have a more unique name that may look like it's hindering you, but in reality it's your background of you're more likely to have had economic issues farther back in the roots of your family, and it keeps passing down. And it'll take a whole family to move themselves and set their children up for success rather than keeping the trend going. For example, there was a family with multiple children, and the second to last one was named Winner. It was Winner Lane. The last one was named Loser. And I guess because they said the father thought that the second to last one, he had a good feeling about him, saying that he's going to do great things, so he's going to name him accordingly, because families thought that naming their children a certain way would affect their future. And in Loser, he's like, yeah, just whatever. It's kind of like, we had a winner, we had a loser, and he thought it'd be ironic naming that. Well, come to find out, Loser did a great deal with his life. He went to school, he went through college, he did well. He went to the New York Police Department, I believe, and then from there, he went as a detective, and then finally to a sergeant. From there, his brother, Winner, actually did not have a good life standing, but instead, he had a long criminal rap sheet. And as a matter of fact, the roles were reversed. Instead of Winner doing well in life, it was Loser who did, and Winner had a troublesome life. Lastly, with causation versus correlation examples, we can look at real-life examples, such as stock market. There's a correlation between consumer confidence and stock market as well. Lately, and this is being reported recently, February 11th, we're looking at the stock market, and the stock market is starting to plummet. And one of the reasons they're saying is that because of higher wages and lower unemployment, inflation starts to increase in rate. So the value of the dollar goes down because people are making more money and goods are about the same cost. That means in order for companies to keep making money, they have to raise the cost of the goods, which means the dollar doesn't carry as much weight anymore, if that makes sense. That's why back in the 70s, gasoline was so cheap, and then now, well, pre-70s, because there was an issue with the Iranian hostage crisis, and we stopped taking in oil, and the gas prices skyrocketed, etc. That's for another story. That's why currently right now gas prices are actually going down. I believe there's a causation from there. Would be that as the economy starts to plummet a bit and collapse, that gas prices, the price of a barrel of crude oil goes down from like $60-something, and it starts dropping down to 60, and then below 60 into the 50s, and then they have to start selling oil for cheap, so they get rid of it. So right now, gas, I think I filled up for $2.33 a gallon. Not too bad. Before that, I filled up for $2.45 a gallon. Pretty good difference there. Per gallon starts to make a difference as you put several gallons in your car. this causation is because people are less likely to spend money. You want people to keep buying your gasoline, so you have to keep dropping the price to encourage consumers to buy. And that's when the consumer interest and consumer confidence in the economy starts to go back up. And that's where we get that natural wave of fluctuation of our economy. And it's due because the Dow has been skyrocketing since the new presidency, and we need a way to come back down. It's inevitable. But the longer you wait, the bigger the crash is at the end. For example, let's say Ford is worth $10 a share. All of a sudden, someone says, Ford's going to be doing something great soon. I think it's going to be worth a lot soon. And everyone starts buying the Ford, buying the Ford, buying the Ford. It becomes $100 a share, $200, $300, $400, and it keeps going up. And until someone says, but we're up so high right now, what if something happens to Ford and Ford disappears? We all lose our money. And that's when consumer confidence goes down. And that cause and effect, that causes people to start selling. And people start selling, they lose confidence in the stock market, and consumer confidence goes away. And then Ford tanks. And they tank all the way back down to $10, to $5, to $1, and they become a penny stock. Now, hasn't happened, but it's possible. And that's what happens. You have to be careful the higher up you go. So if they went to $15, you're like, oh wow, $15. But what if they're, something's not right with Ford? There's part recall or however, and they don't sell well this year. They go back down to $7.50, $7 a share. But they don't plummet to the pennies. You see how the fluctuation is proportional. They grow really big and they demolish very quickly. So you have to be careful with how much money you put into the stock market, because if you overstimulate the economy, people get skeptical, which makes it interesting how a country's economy is basically a make-believe system based on emotion, and it's the only thing that keeps a country stable, is making sure people have somewhat confidence in the country, in the economy, in businesses, in the economy, their jobs, the wellness of the country, whether it be infrastructure, the roads, infrastructure, jobs, protection, security, longevity. But you can't give them too much confidence, because then it creates this inflation, this false sense or bubble of confidence that can easily be popped. And as soon as it does, the bigger you are, the harder you fall.